I was convinced that this was my third buy-to-let. The numbers worked, the area made sense, and I was ready to go. But then I found out what I thought I was buying wasn't actually what was being sold. This is exactly the kind of thing that I wish someone had warned me about. But let's rewind. I'm Remy, I own 2 buy-to-lets and I'm actively hunting for my third and my fourth. Today I'm going to walk you through a deal. From start to finish, the find, the viewing, the numbers, and the moment it all went wrong. But before I show you the deal itself, let me quickly explain what I'm looking for, because the criteria matters in terms of understanding why this one hurt a little bit. I have 3 filters, and if a deal passes all 3, that's when I move forward. If it fails one, that's when I walk. First filter is return on investment, ROI. So I set a minimum of 8%. The reason why I use ROI rather than a fixed budget, a fixed price, is it lets me compare completely different deals on a level playing field. So if we were looking at investing £30,000 into a property, 8% ROI, that's £200 of profit per month. Whereas if we were looking at another deal, involves putting £40,000 in, maybe you get better rent, 9% return on investment, that's the better deal. The percentage tells me at a glance the cash return that I'm getting on the cash that I'm putting into it. For context, a savings account might get you about 4.5%, and I need the property to, of course, outperform that in a decent way to justify the risk and the work that's involved. Ideally, I'm looking for 9% ROI plus 8% is the floor. It's not the target that I'm aiming to achieve. Second is a £300 minimum monthly profit, which I know it sounds like it contradicts my first point in a way, but they serve 2 completely different purposes. The return on investment filter tells me whether the deal is efficient, a good use of my money. The £300 tells me whether the deal actually moves me toward what I'm aiming to achieve. My long-term goal is to replace my salary with this income. And I know that if every property earns at least £300 a month, I need 10 properties to hit a solid base income. That's my number. Third, does it fit the strategy? So this is the less quantifiable one. I invest in Liverpool because I have contractors and a letting agent that I trust up there. I'm 3 hours away with a full-time job, so I need deals that don't require me to be on site every weekend. I want properties where I can add value, but not ones that need a full gut renovation. And just overall looking out for red flags, so high crime, planned development, anything that could hurt the value long term, but then also making sure it's a good home and a property that I want as a part of my portfolio. Generally, I look at 2-bed, 3-bed, terrace, semi-detached, but I'll be flexible if the deal makes sense. And this particular deal was one of those that was out of the norm for me, and that's partly why it ended. I came across this one on Rightmove, so it was listed at £95,000, and the first thing that caught my eye was the rent estimate, £800 a month, which, based on the area, put the property in a place where it's something that I was interested in. Now, it was a flat, and typically I'll avoid flats. The reason for it is with them being leasehold, you don't own the land that the flat sits on. You'll have a lease. Generally, you want 85 years left on the lease. If it's any less than that, it either makes it hard for you to remortgage, or if you come to sell, it impacts the value, costing thousands to extend and update the lease, getting solicitors involved. Let's say you have a healthy lease. You also have service charges. So these are annual fees that everyone has to pay to maintain the building that the flat sits in. So to maintain the hallway, the roofing, the landscape, because obviously you own the flat, but you don't own the building that it sits in. These fees can be substantial, so they do a great job at also eating into your profit and your return on investment. All my usual worries with flats, though, were addressed with this. It's got 88 years left on the lease, which is a little bit on the low end, but it's still easy for me to mortgage. It gives me the opportunity to extend the lease and add value to the property quite easily. Service charges are about £590 a year, so that's about £50 a month. But then even factoring in that cost, the return on investment made me more than happy in what I was trying to achieve. The EPC was D, which with the EPC changes on the horizon is a little bit less than ideal, but there were other flats in the block which were EPC C. I knew exactly what I needed to do, how much it would cost, and even then it still worked out a good investment. The key thing that made me fall for this a little bit more, it was being sold with vacant possession. That means empty, no tenants. I could go in, do a full refurbishment, improve the EPC, new kitchen, new tenants at the current market rate, so I can do everything from scratch, a clean, safe income from the start. This all being in a property 30 minutes away from me, which genuinely appealed to me. It was local, allowed me to build my experience, get better. On paper, this made it interesting. So what did I do? I went to go view it. So when I first got to the area, I must admit, not massively impressed. It wasn't the most aesthetically pleasing, but it's something that can be overlooked. As I go through this as well, see if you can spot a pretty big red flag that I did spot at the time and wonder. But yeah, I'll reveal what it is towards the end of the video. First of all, the kitchen. So what was there was actually very well looked after. The problem is it needs modernisation. You can see that the kitchen needs replacing. It's quite dated. Going into the front room, bearing in mind this is a 1-bed flat. The walls, carpet, very good condition. Very spacious for one person to live there. Nothing really wrong with it. Into the bathroom, again, nothing massively wrong with it, but it just needs modernisation. This being the 1-bedroom, good condition. Not really much else to say. The electrics had been inspected fairly recently as well, so you know, at least to a certain extent, it's quite safe. So let me just say, I'll base it off of making an offer of 90,000. So £800 a month in rent. I do suspect I could get 825 for it as well. Management charges, let's call that 11%, so that'd be £88 of that rental amount. Insurance, 20 quid. Mortgage, 345. £50, and that's those service charges and those ground rent. So that means a monthly profit of 297, which a little bit lower than what I'd be after, but bearing in mind, I do think it would rent for more than that. Again, 18,000, 4.5 in terms of stamp duty, legals, independent legal advice, which I'd have to pay for, just dependent on your circumstances, whether you have that cost. And then refurbishment costs, plus the cost of extending the lease has been factored into that. I'll show up on the screen briefly what that consists of. But return on investment being 8.02. But this is why I'm in love with this property. Once it's been refurbished, let's say bought it for 90,000, the value, once I've extended the lease and done all that, is probably about 115,000. So if I get out a new mortgage of 92,000 to pay back my mortgage of 72,000, that gives me 20 grand to play with. Let's say if I change this over to knocking off that 20 grand that I would have initially put into it, and let's increase my monthly payment to be based off of the higher mortgage sort of price. Yes, my profit per month goes down, but then my return on investment, the money that I'm sort of utilising in that, my return on investment goes up to 9.9%. And that will be money that I can use for another deal elsewhere. So that's where that common sense sort of approach comes in, that third sort of way that I sort of look at a deal. It makes sense. I offered £85,000, had that offer accepted. And at that price, the return on investment got much better, being £311 a month in profit before doing anything, 8.64% return on investment, ticking those boxes nicely. But the fact that I was buying it for 85 instead of 90 or 95 meant that afterwards, when I've done all the refurbishments, I can benefit a lot more from that higher value. My return on investment after the refurbishments was actually about 12.77%. So, what went wrong? Sheesh. Okay, so fast forward 2 weeks. Deposit's been paid to the solicitors. Searches have been submitted. I'm already thinking about which contractors I'm calling in first. And then the fixtures and fittings document comes through. If you've never bought a property before, it's a standard document that the seller fills in. It just lists what's staying with the property and what isn't. So appliances, furniture, routine stuff. I opened it and I stopped. So the seller had written that the flat is being sold with the tenant of several years. Anything in the flat will remain, including the tenants. But my entire plan for this deal was based on no one living there, an empty property that I could fully refurbish before I'm able to rent it, start off fresh. But you can't do a full refurbishment with someone living there. If you got the red flag right from shortly ago, it's 2 beds in that 1-bed flat as well, which throws up a whole lot more questions. I took it straight to my solicitor, straight to the agent, and it turned out the seller had always understood this to be tenants in situ, even though the memorandum of sale, which it's basically a document at the start that formally confirms what was agreed, it says with vacant possession. The property that I thought I was buying wasn't the property being sold. So what happened next? I was given a choice. Option number 1, carry on with the tenants living there. I ran the numbers. Still kind of made sense to a certain extent, but it didn't fit my strategy. I couldn't refurbish it. I can't pull the equity out through a remortgage until those tenants leave. And with the Renters' Rights Act now in play, evicting problem tenants has become so much harder and more expensive than it was a few months ago. Option 2, vacant possession, but the seller wants an additional £5,000 on the purchase price to cover the cost of removing the existing tenants. By this point, I already had a mortgage offer in place, searches were back, we were deep into the process. I wasn't paying an extra £5,000 for a mistake that wasn't mine. So I made a counter offer, higher than what I originally offered, but nowhere near that £5,000 they wanted. I walked away. So what did this actually cost me? In money, I left a £400 deposit with the solicitors. That's likely a bulk of what I'll lose, although I'm still waiting for the final figure. In time, you could argue a couple of months, but a few months of the year. Not just weeks that the deal was going, but the opportunity cost. That's time that I wasn't looking for other deals. It's frustrating, yes, but it happened. And I'd rather show you this than pretend property investing is straightforward. 3 things that you can take away from this. Number 1, read every document they send you, not just the headline stuff, the fixtures and fittings form, the management pack, the solicitor's queries. Boring as it sounds, this is where the deal either is or isn't what you think. If I hadn't read that form, I'd have completed on a property with a sitting tenant, a deal that didn't align with my goals. Number 2, confirm vacant possession early, in writing if you need to. Don't assume just because it's on the Rightmove listing as an example. Ask the agent directly, get it confirmed if you need to by email. Just make sure your solicitor flags anything that says different as soon as possible. A 5-minute email at the start could have saved me a lot of time. Finally, know your non-negotiables before you start, because when you've started putting time into it, when you've started putting money into it and there's momentum going, it can be very tempting to compromise and go against what you originally wanted. But knowing that in advance that tenants in situ was a deal breaker for me made the decision so much easier. It still hurt, but it made the decision clear. So where does that leave me? I'm still looking for property number 3. I'm down £400. I've lost some time in 2026. But if you found this useful, a like genuinely helps the channel more than you'd think. It only takes a couple of seconds and it actually means a lot. Subscribe if you want to follow along the journey. I cover property values, rents, interest rates, your responsibilities as a landlord, like the Renters' Rights Act. Leave a comment down below if you spotted the red flag, or maybe you spotted a red flag that I should have been more worried about. But thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.